Alright, hello. Um, this is going to be a little bit of a. This is another autism video. There is a. Oh, I better turn this off. Blank. I've mentioned in several of my previous videos, and will likely mention again, that occasionally I have predictions. I call them visions occasionally because they're things I shouldn't know that I know. And then other people, then the problem is I have trouble convincing other people that what I know is actually correct. Now I think everybody gets this, but I think the topics that I know about are, it's not all expansive, but it's sometimes surprising. Like for instance, ask me what the capital of Canada is, and I'll say, or Russia, let's say, and I'll say it's Moscow. And I know that. I know the capital is Moscow. If you ask me what the capital of Ethiopia is, I don't really know. If you ask me to guess, I would guess, and I wouldn't be wrong because it would be guessing. It would be different if I said I know the capital of Ethiopia is Riyadh, which I believe is in Iran or something. But the fact is, I just don't know what the capital of Ethiopia is. I'm pretty sure it's not Ethiopia City, but I have no idea what any, other than maybe some South African, Egyptian cities. I don't think I can even name any African cities. So I think there's a pretty clear difference between what people know and what people don't know, and I often tell my students that I'm never wrong. And for the most part, it's okay. It might be a bit of hyperbole, but I'm literally wrong about once a decade about things. And when I'm wrong about something, it's not because I knew that thing and I said I knew it and then I was wrong. That never happens. When I'm wrong, it's because I try to use logic and reason to come up with the answer to something that seems totally valid and sane, and then I'll stick by it and defend it, even though that's not something that I know. It's something that I reasoned out, that I used deduction and induction to figure out, and the process was with my conscious logic, not with not with my memory or anything. I've never misremembered or or represented something as happening that didn't happen. I don't think I phrased that way. I don't misremember things. I don't remember things, but I always remember when I don't remember things. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. And then I have I think this might have something to do with autism. But I'm going to give you 3 or 4 examples of things. First, something I didn't know, the last mistake I made, the last time I was wrong. And then 3 or 4 times, I'll give 3 examples of times when I was totally right. And unexpectedly right. So the time when I was wrong, the last time I remember being wrong was 5 years ago. And the circumstances where I had a student named Shannon, this was my last year in Labrador, and we were discussing the last set of test days, the last set of tests, and I basically said to her, okay, she'd done a couple good programs in a row, and I said, I think you're ready to take your gold solo, gold free finally. And, I'd remembered her taking her gold elements. She passed them the first time, as most of my students do. So I said, okay, you're starting to do consistent solos, let's put your gold solo in. And she gave me a weird look and said, I already have my gold solo. And I didn't remember her taking her gold solo, but obviously I didn't remember her not taking her gold solo. You'd think that would be something I'd remember, since I'd remembered her elements so well, but for some reason I didn't. So I reasoned out, if this week is the first time I've ever thought to myself, hey, you're ready for your gold solo, you should take your gold solo, then clearly I would not have let her taken it 2 years before, which is what she was affirming. That was totally illogical, and I know that she had been improving easily every 6 months. You could see improvement in the quality of her jumps, the fully rotated jumps, the consistency of her jumps, the overall performance of her spins and solo and stroking. Everything was getting better year after year. So if I just thought she was ready to pass now, then there's no way that 2 years before that she would have been ready to pass. So I argued with her. And the test chairman was in the rink, or came in the rink during this argument. And we had had the same test chair for 6 or 7 years, and I think she was somebody who memorized things like that, because she right away said, "Oh yeah, she passed her solo 2 years ago, her gold solo." And so I was wrong, but I was wrong because I wrongly applied logic. I wrongly deducted and inducted, whichever one it was. I can't remember which is which. That she shouldn't have taken her test before this, not that. I had no memory of her ever taking the gold test, but I had no memory of her not taking it. I left my coffee in the other room. Okay. I can't do videos without coffee. That's just wrong. So this is an example of me not having a memory problem. I mean, people forget things. That's fine. I'm not saying I don't have an eidetic memory. It's what Sheldon Cooper has on The Big Bang Theory. But I do have a very clear memory of what I remember and what I don't remember. And I was explaining this to a couple of people recently. I got really into trying to keep photos and recordings and records about 20 years ago because people would doubt my memory. And everybody, I'd have 5 people who went to an event, and all 5 people would remember it differently, and I would swear up and down that I was right. But I mean, there's no way you can convince 4 people who have slightly different memories, none of whom agree with each other or with me, who actually has the correct memory. And in fact, it was always me. It's always been me. And through my life, every time I've had photo evidence or record evidence or written evidence, it turns out that my memory is actually correct. Everybody else's memory has been wrong. I have never had my memory proven wrong by anyone ever in my whole life. I'm over 40 now. It's never happened. But that being said, like I just said, I do make occasional logic errors, which I think everybody does, but it has nothing to do with memory. So that was the last mistake I made, the last time that I insisted that a fact was this, when in fact it was this, and was caught wrong, and was proven to be wrong. Now, a lot of times I'll make qualifying statements like, this is wrong with your jump. I think if we do this, we can fix it. And then it doesn't fix it. And I have some students occasionally say, especially younger students, 7, 8, 9-year-olds who don't understand qualifying statements. They say, you were wrong. You were wrong about this. You said it would fix it, and it didn't. No, I didn't say it would fix it. I said I thought it would fix it. I said it should fix it. I didn't say it would fix it. Definitely would be fixed. And I have noticed that a lot of other coaches don't temper their coaching with qualifying statements. They don't try to use reality to coach. They try to live in a fantasy world, and deliberately in many cases. I've confronted a few of them on it. And they say things like, okay, do this and you'll fix your jumps. And they don't know that's true. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that could not be true, but they're trying to present a very confident, a very positive, a very affirming attitude towards the skater, to give them some kind of motivation, some kind of reassurance that the coach actually knows what they're doing, which I never do. And usually it doesn't cause me a lot of problems, especially with my own students that I've developed along. But when I sometimes work with another coach that constantly exudes confidence and correctness and wisdom and presents themselves as always being right and being the knowledge on everything, and then I come in and present myself, everything is wishy-washy, and maybe this will work, let's try this, let's do this. And I don't do that a lot, but there's a lot of things that I don't, that are essentially trial and error. It's not, I don't resort to a formula that I've developed over time or been taught by another coach or been taught in the clinic. I never resort to formulas. I always do things live. I react live. I need to be able to react to stimuli as it happens. So I don't go into formulaic coaching ever. Now, sometimes in dance, I've done a ton of dance, so a lot of times I see something and it's like, okay, that's what's wrong, that's how you fix it. But even in dance, there's a lot of things where I'm like, maybe this will fix it, maybe it won't, I don't know. So that's the one time I was wrong. Now, the 3 times I was right, and you give I think I'm going to do them in reverse order. The last one is a little bit, no, maybe I'll do them I'll do them in really weird order. The first time that I realized that this was odd, well, actually, let's go do them in chronological order. So the first one was through junior high. We used to have something called fundamentals tests, where we couldn't bring a calculator or paper or anything into the room, just a pen and eraser. And we would be given 20, every Friday we did this, we'd be given a sheet of 20 questions, adding, subtraction, multiplication, division, later on maybe a simple algebra, 3x equals 12, solve for x, stuff like that. Probably stuff they do at a much younger age nowadays, but back then it was mandatory that we do these weekly fundamentals, and I believe we had something like 30 of them through the course of the year. This is the school year, 30 weeks, something like that. And the vast majority of time, a lot of times if we did it in the last period, we would be allowed to leave early and either go somewhere else or wander around, or we would pick up a book or something when we were done. And our classes, I believe, were an hour. I believe they were an hour. And, generally it was expected we would do the whole hour on the fundamentals. And a lot of people would still be writing and frantically trying to finish the fundamentals and not get all the way through in the hour. I generally finished the fundamentals for the first maybe 10, 15, 20 I would go back and recheck my answers. And I'll just explain why in a moment. But never really find any errors. Maybe a decimal placement now and then, but not really many errors. And it would turn out I get the same answer. And then I just stopped checking my work because there was no, I wouldn't find errors ever. Plus I would usually do no work the first time. So I would end up finishing the fundamental of 20 questions in about 10 or 12 minutes of the hour. And throughout the course of the years, I would get 20 out of 20, I would get probably 2/3 of the time, all of them right. And I'd get 19 or 18 occasionally and freak out if I got 17 at that time, which didn't happen very often, maybe once a year. Didn't worry about 18s or 20, 19s, whatever, close enough. And I didn't feel that it was cost effective or time effective to go over the results in great detail. But a lot of times I would look at the addition, subtraction, multiplication things, and we didn't memorize multiplication tables in those days like they do now. It's way too much memorization now, not enough cogitative work. But I would often look at a question. I'd read the question. I'd say, blah, blah, blah. They'd have a 6-figure number plus a 6-figure number. Minus a 6-figure number, what's the answer? And I would read the numbers, read the question, and then write down the answer. I wouldn't have to think about it. I wouldn't have to write it down. I wouldn't have to walk through it. And, for a while this confused me, and I would be like, well, that can't possibly be right. So I would actually go back and go through the work and check it, and it would be the same answer. So I started to have faith after a while that whatever process my brain was going through to get these answers, these math answers, it was right. If I saw a question and knew the answer was right. And it was. It always was. It's like if somebody said, name the capital of Canada, Ottawa, name the capital of the U.S., Washington, D.C., name the capital of England, London. Those answers just pop into your mind. It's not something you have to search for. It's not something you have to try to... Now, the capital of Brazil I have to search for because it's changed 3 times in my life. I believe currently it's Brasilia, but I could be wrong about that. So that's something I'd have to, pause and think about. Most of the countries I don't deal with on a regular basis, I'd have to think about what the actual capital is. But there's a whole bunch that I come into my life often enough that it's on the tip of the tongue, tip of the brain. You see the question, you hear the question, boom, the answer pops into your brain. You're not searching for it. You're not. There's no thought process. There's no logic process. It just comes in. And that's the way math used to be for me in junior high and the beginning of high school. So I would often go down these fundamental sheets of 20 questions, and the only thing I ever couldn't do very well is when they started getting into long division with decimal points and 5 or 6 digits. I would usually have to run through that, especially if the decimal point was in different places. It would just screw with my head, short circuit me, and no answer would pop up, and then I wouldn't really panic, but I'd have to go through the long effort, and that's where I would usually not get 20 out of 20. I'd get 19 out of 20 or 18 out of 20, because when I did the work, I was so used to not having to do the work for most of the questions that when I had to do the work, I was very sloppy, would lose decimal points, would, do addition wrong, because it's in those weird little tables, weird little columns. And I always thought this was fairly, I didn't think it was normal because I was always the first one done in the fundamentals, and the other people in the class who had really high marks on a regular basis, as high as mine, would usually spend the whole hour doing the fundamentals and then go back and recheck things and do it. And I just never bothered. After a while, I was like 10, 15 minutes done. I'm out of there. And I kind of knew which answers I had right and knew which answers might have been wrong because I had to work through them a little more methodically. Anyway, so that's one example of the way my brain works, and I'm told now that that's a somewhat autistic type of thinking, that I can see six-digit numbers. And now it doesn't happen on a regular basis, and it certainly didn't happen through the latter parts of high school, once I stopped doing homework and stopped going to class and stopped, exercising my mind in a mathematical way. But every once in a while, I am posed with a difficult situation, a difficult concept, and the answer just pops into my head. And based on my history, I kind of know that if the answer pops in my head, it's right. Now, the next step, which I've never completely mastered, is convincing other people that the answer that's popped into my head is the right one, which often doesn't happen, so that's a huge problem. So the next two things that happen, and this relates more to my current job as a skating coach, is the first time this happened was in Labrador. I went to Labrador and I taught a boy, Joey, for a little while. Probably doesn't want me mentioning his name, but tough. And I taught him for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then his parents invited me to dinner, and we'd been going through some discussions with, I was new to the club, I was just brought to Labrador. There were a few kids and parents who wanted to be competitive, who had been trying to be competitive, who had been failing to be competitive, nationally competitive. And I had never been nationally competitive. I had been kept out of it in Nova Scotia, which is why I had moved away, because I was tired of being bullied and pushed aside in Nova Scotia. So I went there and I had this first opportunity to really develop my ability to coach national level skaters. And so I taught Joey for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Had a few things happen, and eventually met with his parents for dinner. This is within the first couple months I was there. And at some point during dinner, they said to me, our 2 goals for this year are to have Joey win sectionals in pre-novice at Newfoundland sectionals, which he's never done. And he competed pre-novice for 2 years previous. And to qualify for junior nationals at that point, you had to go from sectionals top 3 or 4, I think, to each challenge, where you had to be top 12 or 14 to get to junior nationals. So the junior nationals would be Eastern Challenge, and then junior nationals where there'd be 24 kids or 26 kids, whatever. And they said this, and the first thing I said to them was, well, those are ridiculous goals. Those are stupid goals. Those are nonsense goals. And they both kind of looked a little shocked. I don't remember Joey being at the table at this point. But the mother and the father paused, and it was an awkward 2 or 3 second pause. And then I realized that they thought I was saying that it was not possible to do this. So I quickly said, no, it should be, with my hands tied behind the back, blindfolded. There should be no problem getting Joey to win sectionals and go to junior nationals, qualify for junior nationals. Those goals are not high enough. We got back into discussing it, and I'm like, there should be no problem with him winning sectionals. There should be no problem with him medaling at Eastern Challenge. There should be no problem with him medaling at Junior Nationals next year. Keep in mind, this is 14 months before Junior Nationals the following year, and about 9 months before sectionals. So there's no reason why I would have that idea in my head, but I just knew as soon as they said it, and it wasn't planned or anything, but as soon as they said their goals, I was like, no, those are ridiculously low goals. That's crazy. We should easily be able to get higher than that. And in my head, I'm thinking gold medals, gold medals, gold medals. I didn't say it, though, because there was, there were a lot of, I just started working with him. I didn't know much about the kid. I didn't know much about his parents. I didn't know about the skating situation in Labrador City. There was a lot of variables that I hadn't seen yet. So I have no explanation. Well, I do have an explanation. I'm going to go into it in a second with a drawing. But I didn't really consciously realize how I knew this. But it turns out that their parents stuck with me through a few dramatic episodes with the club and other parents. And he ended up winning sectionals easily. And I, in fact, put a whole bunch of risk elements and crazy things into his solo, and he still won sectionals easily. And that year there was 5 pre-novice men, so it was a pretty expansive field for Newfoundland. And then came second at Eastern Challenge, came second at Junior Nationals, and came third at Canada Games. Turns out me and Joey never worked well together the entire time, which was a constant cause of concern with the parents. Probably the student that's worked the least with me in my 25 years of coaching. Terrible relationship with Joey, partly for the reasons I already said. I didn't really approach anything with confidence. Everything was a guessing game with me. Maybe we can do this. Maybe this will work. Maybe we should do this. And he also wasn't involved in the conversations with the parents where I said, this is what Joey should be achieving easily. Maybe if he knew I had faith in him, his response to me would have been a little bit different. And then the last time I had an answer pop into my head is I was talking to, and I don't remember the specific instance, I think this just happened over time, but I had my only other competitive kid in Labrador was Emily. And this was near the end of my time in Labrador, 7 or 8 years after Joey. And the mother would constantly, this is when CPC came out, so the mother would go onto websites for other sections for her daughter's event and say, well, my daughter has a 12 in element scores, so does the top person in this section and the top person in this section, and there's only like 4 people in Canada who can beat that, so that means she's the 4th best in Canada, right? This was, I think, going into her first junior nationals in juvenile, and I was like, no. And this is where, again, this poked in. I'm like, there's no way she can come top 4 in Canada. There's no way she can be top 5 in Canada. She has too many issues with stroking, with presentation, with musicality, with rhythm. Yes, her element score is going to be near the top, probably top 3 in Canada, but her, which has helped a lot because junior nationals, a lot of the best skaters don't get to go to junior nationals. I'm not going to go into all that, but the juvenile category at junior nationals was a little misleading, since every section basically got to send someone, even the sections that were in no way competitive with the major sections. Now, luckily at the time, Newfoundland was fairly strong, so even if the top 50 juvenile skaters from the country had gone to junior nationals, Emily still would have done okay, just by virtue of winning Newfoundland sectionals. But the point was, her mother kept trying to say, oh, we can get a medal, national medals, and I kept saying no. No, there's absolutely no way. She can't do it. If she skates the best solo she's ever had and everybody else skates the worst solo they've had in a year, she will not medal. And she didn't. She skated pretty good and came, I think, 7th at junior nationals, and later on at Canada Games came 6th a couple of years later. But was really never a top competitive skater, and I knew that all the time. And I gave the mother, some little reasons why, but it wasn't, it doesn't come down to little reasons. It comes down to an overall understanding of the situation, including a lot of really subtle things that don't really come out clearly. So from all of this, I came to the conclusion that I tried to come up with some kind of visual, some kind of metaphor, some kind of design, some kind of drawing that would demonstrate how I think, how this works. And I finally came up with this. I'm going to draw it this way. So if there's a question, any kind of question, or concern, or issue, or whatever, usually you have an answer. Right? And often, like I said, occasionally the answer is pretty simple. A lot of times, 2 plus 2, 4. Capital of Canada, Ottawa. And very rarely do you have mistakes there. The problem is when you get into a lot of variables, like how predicting the future based on a bunch of people's behavior or development in skating. The way I view it, and I wish I had different colored markers, but I don't, because it would make a lot more sense if I had different colored markers. But I kind of view it like this, where you have, let's erase the arrow actually. You have a question. You have a range of possible answers. And you have all these factors, all these variables going in. And in all of these cases, like for instance in the math case where I was dealing with complex math problems and doing them in my head instantly, essentially the reason was I could eliminate all of these possible options. I knew it wasn't all these. In fact, I knew specifically what it was, and I could find exactly, I could direct the arrow exactly to the right answer, wherever that answer happened to be. When it wasn't clear, like in long division, I would have to sort through this, do the work, show the work, go over the work to get the right answer. And even then, because I had to take a more circuitous route to the answer, there was a possibility that it was going to be incorrect. This one, impossible, it's going to be incorrect. So when the parents, when Joey's parents gave me the goal of going to junior nationals, qualifying for junior nationals, going to sectionals, let's say that was two goals. Those were their two goals. And I said those goals were ridiculous. It wasn't because I saw a clear path to national medals. Obviously, there was no clear path. My theory is that what I saw was a ton of the variables. I knew what I was capable of. After coaching Joey for a month, I knew what Joey was capable of. I knew what the club was offering. I knew what the atmosphere in the club was. I knew what his work habits were. I had a ton of these lines filled in. And even though there were a lot of variables that I didn't know, that I didn't understand, that we were going to run into later, that we're going to, I didn't have a clear path to the goal. I knew that I could get to that goal that way. Or if it turned out not to work this way, or if it turned out not to work this way, if it turned out not to work this way. So I knew that we had so many different routes to get that level of success that it was very unlikely that we were not going to achieve that. Very unlikely. And I knew these two were super easy to achieve, irregardless of changes in this and adding different lines in and making it more dense and adding more confusion. I knew that these were totally possible, too easy. And we needed to set our goals a little higher. That should explain it good enough, right? And then the same thing, kind of the reverse thing happened with Emily. I think the mother was using logic and saying, well, my daughter does the same jumps as everyone else in juvenile ladies. My daughter does this, my daughter does that. I don't understand from the point totals why my daughter can't be a medalist at junior nationals. So let's circle one of these. So my daughter should be able to be a medalist at junior nationals. I don't know what her thought process was, but I looked at this and and this is after coaching her daughter for like 4 years, 3 or 4 years, I think. So I was intimately knowledgeable about her daughter's capabilities, what she did, how hard she worked, what her talents were, what my talents were, etc., etc., etc. And I just couldn't see any way through this to get to here, to get to a national medal. So I had to shoot her down, the mother down, over and over and over again. Now, the daughter never said to me, I'm going to be a national. Everything seemed to kind of come as a surprise for her. Not to me. None of her development was a surprise to me. And for the first 2 or 3 years, when she kept winning event after event after event after event after event, and came second at an event, and that was the worst event she'd had in 3 years, she freaked out over it. But the mother was kind of surprised. My daughter's doing really well. I don't really understand. I was totally not surprised at all. None of that was surprising to me. But then when the mother made the leap of, hey, she's winning all these events, I've looked at all the marks across Canada, she should be able to medal at junior nationals, I had to say no. There's no, and it wasn't based on lack of support by me. It wasn't based on a lack of belief in the daughter. It's just looking at all the variables that I had written down. There was no path anywhere for Emily to be a medalist at junior nationals. And I'm sure people will, even watching this, will summarize that as, well, you didn't believe in Emily and you believed in Joey. And that's not what it is. Belief in your skater is maybe 1 or 2 of those little lines down here. The other ones are skating atmosphere, attitude of parents, friends, family, support of other skaters, pressure of other skaters to succeed. Various influences from me are a huge aspect to that. Although I'd say the coach is more about navigating your way through those variables and managing those variables rather than setting up different variables. Like, these are almost all barriers that need to be overcome, and then we need to figure out how to get through those barriers to get to the end result. I think that's it. I hope that that really, when I came up with this particular way to envision that, it really set it in my mind as a really correct interpretation, a correct vision of how I come to the beliefs and conclusions I do, and why I'm always right. I've never ever. I wish I hadn't erased this. I never ever have a question and a potential goal and a bunch of stuff and say, well, yeah, we can get here, and then fail to do so. Never. To my knowledge, it's never happened. Now, I don't make a habit. Coaches aren't really supposed to make promises to parents. It's not, and when I first did it, it wasn't, because a lot of coaches will lie to try to say, to try to get parents to believe them, try to get parents to invest more money, more effort, more money. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you give me all your money and all your time and all your effort, I can probably achieve that. I can achieve this. And then whether, a lot of times they will because they got people to believe in them. But I tend to be able to, I'm not really into that. I do make a lot of predictions on whether people will pass tests or not pass tests, whether people do well in competitions or not competitions. But a lot of times, again, it's just logic and deduction. It's not, when you deal with thousands of variables and then I know the answer, I know that's not deduction, that's not reason, that's not rationale, that's not logic. That's me intuitively understanding the factors and believing that with our strengths, we can easily achieve this irregardless of the obstacles in the way. And it doesn't happen a lot. And the only time when I think there was a couple times where I could have achieved something with a skater. I had a skater who was about 3 months away from medaling at a national event. I didn't explain that to the parents. I didn't explain that to the skater. I didn't explain that to the club. And we ended up having a couple tiffs and parted ways. And he ended up not doing well at nationals at all. He did terrible at junior nationals. When I had him set up to medal, likely come first, possibly second at that event, that year at that event. This happened right before Joey, or I guess after the Joey thing, but around the same time. And I always kind of regretted that I didn't talk to the parents, talk to the kid but I think, at the time he was juvenile. I didn't know a lot about juvenile. I didn't know he was going to medal. Turns out he was going to medal. So now I'm a little more open with my feelings about where we can go with things and how we can go with things. I currently have one skater out of the 7 who I've said, based on your current trajectory, based on the current conditions, you will be a really good national competitor if you stay with me for the next 2 or 3 years. I have 3 more that can, but they're going to have to alter the way they approach skating, skate more. They don't really need more lessons, but they need to be able to skate more, commit more to skating, do some cross-training, just kind of change their approach a little bit, not much. And I've kind of gone into that with a couple of the parents, really only one, I guess. Yeah, one so far. But again, these aren't false promises, and it's not something that's a regular part of my coaching. I usually reserve judgment until I have. I need to see a lot of those factors. I need to be exposed to a lot of those factors before I know whether or not we can navigate them well. This went way too long. Anyway, hopefully that, I don't think that clears up anything, but hopefully it does clear up something.